the Audit and Risk Committee. May I remind you that this meeting will be recorded. This afternoon we've got Mary Wren with us, who a lot of the committee members won't have met yet. Mary's from the auditors and is usually here, but I don't think you weren't at the last one, so this is the first time, and we're a fairly new bunch and settling in, so lots of explanations, I think. Lucy's come here to observe. She's very much involved in our accounts and the dealing with the auditors. I think Sue Gilbert and Andrew Hall and everybody else you all know. So let's get underway. First of all, to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Can I take those as a true and fair record of the last meeting? Thank you. Any apologies?
Yep. Yes, Chairman, we've had apologies from Councillor Barry Bond and Councillor Christopher Evans.
Any declarations of interest? We'll go straight to our first report, Chief Internal Auditor, the Internal Audit Annual Outturn Report. Thank you very much, Debbie.
Thank you, Chair. Just to remind everybody who I am, so I'm Debbie Harris, the Chief Internal Auditor here at South Staffordshire Council. To my left, I've got Sue Bluck, who's the Audit Manager for South Staffordshire's Internal Audit Service, and also to my right, Dave Fletcher, who's the Counter Fraud Manager that will be presenting the Fraud and Corruption Outturn report in a moment or two. So to give a bit more background to this report, which starts off on page 6 of your pack, this is the annual internal audit outturn report. Internal auditor are required to deliver an annual audit opinion and to report to those charged with governance at a time to support the annual governance statement. There are various requirements in terms of what the annual report should cover. It should obviously include the annual audit opinion. It should include a summary of the work that supports the audit opinion and also a statement on conformance with our public sector internal audit standards and the local government application note. So back in April last year, so the 12th of April 2022, the internal audit plan for 22-23 was agreed. And since that time, we go about conducting various audits, largely at a time to suit the various services. But from time to time, we will have to flex that plan to take account of various emerging risks. So there will be the odd audit that will be cancelled and various audits that are added. Any revisions are brought to the audit committee for endorsement. Also, as we don't like to impose ourselves on services, well, as little as possible, sometimes we have to, we do try and ensure that timings of audits suit the services. So there will be some audits that you'll see in a moment that are still at draft report, but the team actively engage with management to ensure that they're finalised as soon as possible if it goes over year end. So on page 7 of your pack, this gives a bit more detail in terms of our audit outputs. So when we undertake audit assignments, we produce a report and we give each report has an opinion. There are 2 positive types of opinions. There's substantial, which is our highest opinion, an adequate assurance and a limited assurance. And those opinions are driven by the number of high, medium and low level recommendations that are made during the course of an audit review. In terms of how we carve up our audit plan, we have 3 categories. We have the core financial systems, we have other assurance reviews, and then we have the counter fraud work. At the end of the year, those 3 categories come together, and based upon the number of substantial, adequate and limited assurances, we give an overall pass or fail award, and that then drives the annual audit opinion, and I'll talk about that again a bit later on. We also use this report as a way to give a further update to members on the implementation of any high-level recommendations. So you'll see a paragraph 3.9 on page 7 of your pack, those high-level recommendations that were made both this in 22-23 and also the previous year. And you'll see that there's been some movement. So in previous years, there were 7 high-level recommendations. 3 have now been implemented and 4 are still in progress. And the details of those are at Appendix 1. For 22-23, there were 5 high-level recommendations being made, and those are all in progress at the moment. So turning our attention to the audit plan outcomes for 22-23, the first category is core financial systems, and you'll see at paragraph 3.10 towards the bottom of your page 7 the list of those audits that are within the financial systems categories. So you'll see there that there are a number of substantial and adequate opinions. There is one limited assurance review which relates to debtors and debt recovery. Members will have received that full report on the 30th of June. Unfortunately, due to the timing of having to get this report out, we couldn't bring the full report of the debtors report to you as part of this meeting, but it will be presented at the October meeting. Also, just to confirm that the council tax review that was at draft report has now been finalised. In terms of the other assurance reviews, that's detailed at paragraph 3.11 on page 8 of your pack. And again, you will see that there are the majority of the audits are either substantial or adequate. There is one limited assurance, and this committee received back in March the full report in relation to the cybersecurity incident preparedness and response effectiveness piece of work that was undertaken. And later on the agenda in the confidential section, we do have an update in relation to that piece of work. At paragraph 3.12 on page 9 of your pack, this details in summary format the counter-fraud work that's been undertaken, and that's split between our proactive exercises and also our special investigations. And so you'll see that we have undertaken some continuous controls monitoring work and also some work in relation to purchase card administration. Dave Fletcher, the county fraud manager, will go into much more detail in a few moments around the work that we've undertaken during the year. Also, we've carried out one special investigation during 22-23 relating to missing cash at one of the council's establishments, and that full report was also presented at the March meeting, and Dave will give a bit more detail again in a few moments. So in terms of the overall audit opinion, we set out in our audit strategy paper each year how we formulate our opinion. So as mentioned, there are 3 categories, and I do have to apologise at this point. At paragraph 3.17, we have within that table there is an error there. We talk about 5 categories. There are actually 3 categories. So to obtain a substantial assurance, we have to have all 3 categories passing. An adequate assurance, there are 2 categories passing, and a limited assurance, we have 1 category passing. And how we pass or fail a category is based upon the number of audits achieving an adequate or higher assurance, and we have it that at least 80% of those audits should be given an adequate or substantial opinion. So based upon the methodology, you will see at the table at 3.18 that all of our categories pass. So that is the core financial systems, the assurance reviews, and the counter fraud and corruption work. So based upon all 3 categories passing, we are giving a substantial assurance opinion over the adequacy and effectiveness of the organisation's governance, risk and control framework for 22-23, and this is consistent with the opinion awarded the previous year. Moving on to our own performance measures, we have two key performance indicators as a service. One is the completion of the audit plan, because as you would expect, we have to do enough work to be able to formulate our opinion. And also we have our quality customer satisfaction questionnaires. You'll see those targets are listed in the table at 3.20, and you will see that we've exceeded our targets for 22-23. Also, we have to provide details of how we conform with our public sector internal audit standards. So back in 2013, the public sector internal audit standards were published. Since that time, they have been revised in 2017, and also there is a local government application note that was published in 2019. There are about 130 standards that we need to comply with. One of those, well, a few of those standards relate to the fact that we have to do our own self-assessment against the standards. However, every 5 years, we must have an external assessment. So our previous external assessment was back in January 2018, and as a result, in January in 2023, we conducted our second external assessment. That was conducted by CIPFA, and again, the full inspection report was presented to the March committee meeting. That gave us a very positive assurance opinion. We actually were awarded the highest category of pass, although it says generally conforms. That was the highest level that we could achieve. There were no recommendations made and just one advisory action, which was around just keeping a watching brief on the standards because they are going to be revised over the next 12 to 18 months. So with that in mind, I can confirm that there are no impairments or restrictions for me to be able to form and deliver my annual audit opinion for 22-23. Appendix 1 on page 13 of your pack refers to both the previous high-level audit recommendations and also the 22-23 audit recommendations, and it gives an idea of what the recommendation was and actually their current status in terms of whether they've been implemented or in progress and what the latest position is. Chair, with permission, I would like to now hand over to Dave Fletcher, who will now talk through Appendix 2, which starts off on page 23 of Members' Pack.
Thank you. So I'll just outline our work programme, and the report runs through this in order. We do a section on strategic work, proactive work, and then our reactive work. The objective of everything we do is to prevent, detect, and deter fraud. Under strategic, we have done a self-assessment against fighting fraud and corruption locally, which is a set of standards currently hosted by CFAS, a professional body. We've assessed ourselves against the 37 standards and judged ourselves to be compliant with 34 of them. Where we don't think the council is fully compliant, I'm not too concerned. We've got a new whistleblowing policy and we should be assessing how effectively that's been rolled out. It is new. It's not the time to do that yet. Similarly with e-learning, it's assessing how effective the rollout of that is. Third area where we haven't judged ourselves to be fully compliant is publicising frauds. We can't really do that until we have a fraud that goes to court and someone's found guilty. So the time will come at some point to do that, but until we get a case that goes to court, we don't have the opportunity. Our proactive work is largely focused around continuous controls monitoring. This is where we look at ways to use data to screen transactions for red flags. That's become established this year. We have got areas where we'd like to expand it next year. We've made some minor findings. We've looked at duplicate invoices and we found 2 payments which the council were seeking recovery on, totalling £968. And we've found some minor duplicated expenses, one of which I've been told is refunded. The other one, I am struggling to get hold of the individual, so we'll carry on with that this year. again, both of those and the invoices, they don't feel like a fraud, they don't look like a fraud, the values are low. I think it's error and oversight. So we can use CCM to pick that up. We've also looked at purchase card transactions versus absence to see if cards have been used and people have been on holiday or off sick. We've done that and we haven't had any transactions of concern there. What we were hoping to do, and we will be picking up again in the current year, is comparing council tax discounts to electoral roll data to see if there's any anomalies there. We've had trouble getting hold of the council tax discount data. That is work in progress and in correspondence with the team in the council, and as soon as they get that data, we'll start piloting that. First time round, it's a case of doing some analysis and seeing what we find, but I'd like to think there's an opportunity to repeat that on a regular basis, whether that's monthly, quarterly, or 6 monthly or annually. We've done one proactive exercise looking at purchase cards. What we found there is that the system has improved at the time of the audit, so we've got some individual areas of non-compliance looking at historic transactions, but by the time we did the audit, processes were in place. So we've made some recommendations, but it's recommendations along the line of continue with the controls that have been recently implemented. So overall, I'd say that's a positive finding there. The council takes part in the National Fraud Initiative, which is a data matching exercise between many public sector organisations. The Cabinet Office compare data sets uploaded by the council to data sets from elsewhere, and then publish for us a list of matches where they think further action should be taken place to review those. We won't be doing that personally, but we will be facilitating reporting back to management and here on how those progress. In total, there's 433 matches. I imagine the vast majority of them are of no concern once they've been looked at. Maybe things have been dealt with already in the time lag between uploading data, getting the results and processing them. But in future meetings, we'll come back to you there with how that's going. We've had one investigation over the course of the year. This was reported back in March and related to a cash theft. We've raised recommendations to improve the control environment there, but we were unable to identify a potential perpetrator there. Certainly the money has gone missing, but we couldn't identify a subject to carry out further inquiries. We did find weaknesses with CCTV and cash handling processes, which could help deter a similar fraud going forwards. Happy to take any questions, otherwise summary.
Thank you for that report. Any members got any questions? Well, I think it was so thorough that I'm surprised there weren't any. A lot goes on in the background, and I think it's full marks to our internal audit, and it makes our job easier, gives us confidence. You mentioned about not being able to report fraud because there hasn't been any. I don't know how, but I think it's still important to publicise what you're doing, because I think the mere fact that you are doing that deters small frauds happening. And if there's any way that we can publicise this and everybody know that we've got your services, then I think that's for the better. I'm not quite sure how you do it, but maybe that's down to us as audit committee to spread the word and bring people's concerns to you. But thank you very much for that report. That takes us on to the external audit plan. This is a report to the external auditor, and Mary Wren's going to take us through that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As a brief introduction, I'm Mary Wren, a Senior Manager with Grant Thornton, the Council's external auditors. I'm generally the main contact for the finance team and responsible for the day-to-day delivery of the external audit. As external auditors, we generally have two main responsibilities amongst other powers and duties that we have that aren't applicable for sales staffs in particular. But our main two duties are to give an opinion on the financial statements and also to give an opinion on the council's arrangements in relation to value for money. So there are two key areas of work. Avtar Sohali couldn't be here today, but he's the key audit partner, and it is Avtar who will sign the audit opinion based on the work that's been carried out by the audit team. So the report, the audit plan today basically sets out what we're going to do in relation to the 22-23 financial statements. Firstly, if I could take you to page 11 of our report, I'd just like to touch on materiality. This is a key concept, and all of our work is done under the umbrella of materiality. And ultimately, we set a level that is, if your financial statements were incorrect by a monetary amount, what would that value need to be for them to give a true and fair view of the accounts? Now, that's generally set as a percentage of your expenditure, which is a common benchmark across local government. And the materiality we set has been set at £1 million, and that's compared to a year of £100,000. There are other sections of the accounts which are generally deemed to be maybe more sensitive to readers of the accounts, and they can involve, for example, senior officers' remuneration, which can often get areas of focus. And we do set a lower level of that, and that is a level of £16,500. If I could just take you back through the report to page 7 of our report. The majority of our audit time is focused around areas we call significant risks, and these take a lot of the audit time. They're generally areas which are inherently complex, may involve the use of external experts for both the council and for ourselves. There may be a high degree of estimation, and they're usually highly material values. They will be the largest numbers usually floating around in the financial statements. There is one non-rebuttable risk. So this risk will appear in every audit plan across the local government, NHS, and every private sector organisations as well. And that is the risk that management could override internal controls. So we do specific work around that, largely focused around a detailed risk assessment of journal transactions. So that does take a significant proportion of audit time. The remaining two risks are as I previously mentioned, a high degree of estimation involved, use of external experts, valuers, actuarial assumptions, for example, and they relate to the valuation of land and buildings, which is our one significant risk, and that is on page 8, which details both the risk and a high-level summary of the work that we will plan to carry out. And then on page 9 is the valuation of the pension fund liability. Again, an area with a significant degree of assumptions involved in estimation. So those are the three areas which do generate a lot, we spend a lot of the audit time, which is why I wanted to just focus on those three in particular. If I could take you through to page 13, as I briefly mentioned at the start, we also have a duty in relation to assessing the council's arrangements in relation to value for money. Our risk assessment procedures are ongoing, almost complete, to be honest, at the moment. We haven't identified any areas of particular risk that we need to focus on for the council, but obviously the whole risk assessment process is constantly under review. Should something emerge, we will report it through to this committee as well. If I could just take you through to page 16 and page 16, 17 and 18, they detail breakdown of our audit fees, and also that we remain independent and don't provide other services to the authority, which we have to set out in detail. I wasn't going to spend any more time, but I'm more than happy to take any questions on the content.
Thank you very much for that. Any questions? No, in that case, to move on to next report, which is Mary Wren again, informing the audit risk assessment.
Thank you, Chair. It's quite a lengthy report. I wasn't going to go into it in a great amount of detail. As part of our audit planning procedures, we obviously ask a lot of questions of management, and they cover, you know, a range of areas, for example, forward laws and regulations, going concern, particular accounting estimates, for example. So this report is there to capture the responses that management have provided to us, and to triangulate that with those charged with governance, with this committee. Are those responses in line with your understanding of the organisation, and are there any areas that you would like to add to that we can build into those responses? But I wasn't going to say any more, but happy to take questions and comments.
Thank you for that. No comments from, no questions from. Thank you very much again for that report. And now I'd like to exclude the public and press. This will carry on recording. It's not.
No, Chairman, I will stop the report.
Okay. To resolve that the press and public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following items, on the grounds that they're likely to involve the disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3, part 1 of the Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972. This is a result of an audit carried out. Okay. Okay.